Out of nowhere, an angry snake twisted around Luna, the Mama Labrador, setting off a chain of events that is truly hard to believe. What happened next will astonish you. Suddenly, a sharp whimper sliced through the calm, a sound so urgent and out of place that Jake, a local garbage collector, paused mid-motion, his hand on the trash bin. The cry didn't belong to the noisy chatter of suburban life, nor to the joyful bark of pets playing in the morning sun. It was a sound laced with distress, a plea for help that couldn't be ignored. Jake's heart raced as he tried to pinpoint the direction of the noise. It came from behind the tall wooden fence of 42 Maple Street, a usually quiet spot. Today, however, something was amiss. He dropped the bin with a clatter and moved closer, his mind swirling with possibilities. What could instill such fear in a creature? His imagination conjured images of pain or entrapment, but the reality awaiting him could be far worse. Driven by a mix of concern and an insatiable curiosity that often led him into unexpected adventures, Jake approached the gate. His usual routine would have him off to the next house, the steady progression of his daily route unaltered. Yet the emotional weight of the whimper tugged at him stronger than the pull of duty. He glanced around, ensuring no prying eyes were watching, and with a hesitant hand he unlatched the gate. Stepping quietly into the yard, the scene that unfolded before him was one he'd never expected. At the center, a large black Labrador lay frozen on the grass, her body tense and eyes wide with terror. Wrapped around her was an enormous snake, its scales glistening in the sunlight as it tightened its grip. The dog's whimpers grew softer, more desperate, as if she knew the peril she was in. Jake's breath hitched. The snake, a python possibly 6 feet long, seemed out of place in such a suburban setting. Clearly, the creature had escaped from somewhere, bringing its wild instincts into this domestic backdrop. The Labrador, named Luna as Jake would later learn, bore the weight of the snake's muscular body with a resigned fear that spoke volumes of her plight. As the seconds stretched, Jake's decision crystallized. Despite his racing mind warning him of the risks, the need to act overcame his hesitation. His role as a bystander was over. He was now part of her story. Resolved, and with a newfound courage, he pulled out his phone to dial for help, his eyes never leaving the entwined pair. The decision to step into the backyard was no longer just a choice, but a commitment to intervene in a life-threatening crisis unfolding right before him. As Jake's call connected, he described the scene in urgent whispers, his voice low but clear. "There's a huge snake here, wrapped around a dog. I need help immediately," he said, his gaze locked on the grim tableau before him. He rattled off the address, his words punctuated by the distant bark of neighborhood dogs, unaware of the drama unfolding at 42 Maple Street. The operator assured him that help was on the way, urging him to stay back and keep safe until professional assistance arrived. With the phone call made, Jake's initial shock began to morph into a grim resolve. He couldn't just stand back and watch. He had to do something, yet every move seemed fraught with danger. The python's thick body was coiled tightly around Luna, who lay almost motionless on the grass. Her breathing was shallow, each breath a struggle against the constricting force of the snake. The scales of the python shimmered with a cold, menacing beauty, a stark contrast to the warm sun that filtered through the leaves overhead. Despite the operator's warnings, Jake inched closer. He needed to understand the situation better if he was going to make any helpful moves. As he approached, the rustle of his footsteps on the dry leaves seemed deafening in his ears. He watched, heart pounding, as the snake adjusted its coils, the movement subtle yet unmistakably tighter. Luna's eyes met Jake's, her look one of stark terror mixed with a plea for help that no one could ignore. Jake's mind raced for solutions. The garden shed at the corner of the yard might have something useful, a pole or a broom, anything to put between him and the snake. Yet, as he scanned the area for anything that could aid in the rescue, his eyes caught a new detail that chilled his blood even further. Not far from the dire scene, 3 small black Labrador puppies huddled together beneath a bush. Their tiny whimpers were almost drowned out by the more immediate crisis, but now that Jake had noticed them, the stakes skyrocketed. These were Luna's puppies, no doubt, and their safety was now his concern as well. The presence of the puppies added a new layer of urgency. Jake knew he couldn't wait passively for help to arrive. Any sudden move from the snake could spell disaster not just for Luna, but for her vulnerable puppies as well. They watched their mother with wide, fearful eyes, their small bodies trembling. Taking a deep breath, Jake backed away slightly and looked around for something, anything that could be used to distract or disorient the snake without getting too close. His eyes landed on a garden hose coiled neatly against the house. It was a long shot, but perhaps he could use it to spray the snake, maybe startle it enough to loosen its grip on Luna. Carefully, Jake made his way to the hose, his movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling the snake further. He unhooked it from the tap and dragged it towards where Luna and the snake were locked in their dangerous embrace. His hands trembled as he adjusted the nozzle to a powerful spray, ready to unleash a stream of water. With one last glance at the quiet street beyond the fence, as if to ensure no one would witness his reckless intervention, Jake aimed the hose at the snake. His finger tightened on the nozzle, the hose trembling in his grasp as he braced himself to douse the serpent in a cold, forceful jet of water. The decision to act was made. There was no turning back now. He hoped against hope that his plan would work, that the water would be enough to save Luna and protect her tiny family watching from the shadows. As the cold water struck the snake, its reaction was immediate and violent. The powerful jet disrupted the creature's sinewy hold, causing it to recoil slightly. Luna whimpered, her body twitching with renewed fear and pain as the python hesitated, its head swaying as if disoriented by the sudden assault. Jake's heart raced as he held the hose steady, his resolve firm despite the uncertainty of the outcome. For a moment, the snake's grip seemed to loosen, and Jake's hopes surged. But the python, resilient and driven by its primal instincts, quickly adapted to the situation. It repositioned itself, tightening its coils around Luna with even greater force. The Labrador's whimpers turned into a painful yelp, her eyes closing tightly against the pressure. Jake felt a pang of guilt. His attempt to help might have worsened her plight. Watching Luna struggle, Jake's internal conflict deepened. His mind was torn between the urge to do more and the fear of causing further harm. He knew he was out of his depth, dealing with a wild animal in a suburban backyard. This was no longer just a matter of courage. It required expertise and precision that he lacked. Dropping the hose, Jake pulled out his phone again, this time with a trembling hand. The urgency of the situation was escalating, and he could no longer rely solely on his improvised solutions. He dialed 911 again, his voice urgent but clear. "The snake is constricting. We need animal control here now. This is getting critical," he reported, his eyes never leaving the distressed dog. The operator's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding before him. "Help is on the way, sir. Please, stay safe and keep your distance. Can you confirm that the dog is still alive?" "Yes, she's alive but in a lot of pain. Hurry, please," Jake responded, his voice a mix of plea and command. He ended the call and stepped back, his gaze fixed on Luna, whose suffering was nearly palpable. The snake's body was a grotesque belt of pressure, each coil a potential death sentence. As the distant sound of sirens began to fill the air, signaling the approach of help, the situation reached a critical point. The snake, perhaps sensing the vibrations of the approaching vehicles, tightened its grip further. Luna let out a low, heartbreaking moan, her body tensing under the unbearable pressure. Jake felt helpless, his earlier actions seeming insignificant against the scale of the danger. As the sirens grew louder, he prayed that the emergency responders would arrive in time to make a difference, to save Luna and ensure the safety of her innocent puppies waiting anxiously in the shadows. The blaring sirens crescendoed as emergency vehicles skidded to a halt outside 42 Maple Street. Jake, heart pounding with both relief and dread, watched as first responders quickly unloaded their equipment and approached the gate. His report had mobilized them swiftly, their arrival a testament to the urgency of the situation. The first to enter the yard was an animal control officer, her face set in a mask of concentration. She was followed closely by a paramedic, both trained for different emergencies but united in their mission to save Luna. The officer, spotting Jake, motioned for him to stay back. "We've got this, sir. Please keep a safe distance," she instructed firmly, her eyes quickly assessing the scene. Jake nodded, stepping back but keeping his focus on Luna and the snake. The animal control officer approached the entangled pair cautiously, her movements deliberate to avoid startling the python further. She carried a long pole with a loop at the end, commonly used to restrain snakes safely. "Hey there, girl, hang in there," she spoke softly towards Luna, who was visibly struggling to maintain consciousness under the crushing weight of the snake. The officer's partner, meanwhile, prepared a transport container, opening it nearby to ensure a quick transfer once the snake was secured. As they coordinated their approach, the paramedic stood by, her medical kit ready to provide immediate care to Luna once freed. The officer with the pole slowly looped it towards the snake's head, attempting to coax it to release its grip. The snake, sensing the new threat, tightened its coils, its body a rigid mass of muscle and scales. Luna gasped, a faint sound of distress escaping her as the pressure intensified. "Easy, easy," the officer whispered to the snake, her tone calm but assertive. "Let's not make this worse for anyone." With a swift, practiced movement, she managed to get the loop over the snake's head. The snake writhed, its body coiling and uncoiling in an attempt to escape, but the officer was quick to tighten the loop, gaining control over the head. "Got it!" she exclaimed, a small victory in the tense ordeal. Her partner rushed over, helping to gently pull the snake away from Luna's weakened body. The python resisted, its tail flicking violently, but together they managed to start unwinding it from the dog. As the snake's grip loosened, Luna's body sagged to the ground, exhausted and barely responsive. The paramedic immediately moved in, checking her vitals and preparing to administer first aid. "Hang on, Luna," the paramedic murmured, applying pressure to a small wound on her side where the snake's scales had scraped her skin. "Help's here now." The unwinding continued, each coil removed, decreasing the pressure on Luna's ribcage. But as the snake was finally freed from around her, Luna's condition seemed to deteriorate rather than improve. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a laborious effort, her sides heaving visibly. The paramedic's expression grew more concerned. "She's going into shock. We need to move fast." She turned to her bag, pulling out emergency supplies as she prepared to stabilize Luna for transport. As they worked, Jake stood by, feeling a mix of relief and overwhelming concern. The initial rescue was successful, but Luna's fight was far from over. As the last of the snake's coils were removed and it was secured in the container, Luna whimpered softly, her body trembling with the aftershocks of her ordeal. The battle for her recovery was just beginning, and Jake could only hope that her strength would see her through. As Luna was carefully laid on a stretcher, her instincts as a mother suddenly surged to the forefront. Despite her evident exhaustion and pain, her eyes snapped open with a fierce, protective glint as she caught sight of her puppies whimpering at the edge of the yard. With a surprising burst of energy, Luna struggled to her feet, staggering slightly as she positioned herself between the approaching handlers and her pups. The animal control officers paused, taken aback by the sudden defiance of the weakened Labrador. "It's okay, girl," one officer soothed, attempting to calm her. But Luna's maternal instincts were fully ignited, her body language shifting from defensive to offensive as she faced the perceived threat to her offspring. Her ears pinned back, and with a low growl, the officers and Jake gasped in shock as Luna bit down on the tail of the snake, her teeth sinking deep into the flesh in a desperate bid to ensure it no longer posed a threat. "Hold her back!" shouted the paramedic, rushing over to assist. The handlers quickly intervened, trying to pull Luna away from the snake, which thrashed wildly within its confines, its tail whipping back and forth in pain. The struggle was intense and brief. Luna, driven by a raw, primal need to protect her young, refused to let go until the handlers managed to gently pry her jaws open and lead her away. Her energy spent, Luna's legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed onto the stretcher, her breathing heavy and laboured. The paramedic immediately administered oxygen and checked her vitals, her skilled hands moving quickly to stabilise the courageous dog. "She's really pushed herself too far this time," the paramedic muttered, concern evident in her tone. "We need to get her to the vet now." As they prepared Luna for transport, Jake stood nearby, his admiration for the dog's bravery mingling with worry. He watched the paramedic work, noting how Luna's eyes occasionally flickered to where her puppies huddled together, their small bodies trembling. The setting sun cast long shadows over the yard, the drama of the day drawing to a close with an uncertain night ahead. The air was cooler now, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves and providing a stark contrast to the tension that still hung heavy. Jake approached the puppies, his presence calming them slightly. "Don't worry," he whispered, his voice soft but filled with resolve. "We'll take care of your mom. She's a fighter." As the emergency team lifted Luna into the van, her condition stabilized but critical, Jake couldn't help but feel a deep respect for the Labrador. Her sudden counterattack, even in the face of overwhelming odds, had shown a remarkable spirit. The van doors closed with a soft thud, and the vehicle pulled away, its lights piercing the growing dusk. Luna's fate hung in the balance, her life now in the hands of the skilled veterinary team. Jake watched the van disappear, a silent prayer in his heart for the brave mother who had fought so fiercely to protect her own. As the van carrying Luna disappeared into the evening, the silence that settled over 42 Maple Street was profound. The ordeal had left an indelible mark on the quiet neighbourhood, and Jake found himself standing amid the aftermath, pondering the day's harrowing events. He turned his attention to the whimpering puppies, their small forms huddled together for comfort. His heart ached for them, knowing they were too young to comprehend the gravity of their mother's condition. Jake knelt beside them, his presence soothing. The puppies, sensing his gentle demeanour, gradually calmed as he stroked their soft fur. He looked around the yard, now scattered with the remnants of the day's chaos, coiled hoses, the snake's containment unit, and the first responders' footprints in the grass. Each detail told a story of the battle fought in this unassuming backyard. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a car pulling up to the house. Mrs. Allison, Luna's owner, stepped out, her face etched with worry. She had been hastily called by a neighbour and had rushed back from her errands, anxious about her beloved pet and the puppies. "Jake, what happened? Is Luna—" Her voice trailed off, unable to complete the question, her eyes brimming with tears. "She's been taken to the vet," Jake replied, standing to meet her with a reassuring smile. "She was incredible, Mrs. Allison. She protected her puppies, and help arrived in time. They're doing everything they can for her now." Mrs. Allison nodded, her hands trembling as she took in the sight of her yard, the reality of the situation settling in. "And the puppies?" she asked, her gaze falling on the small, quivering group. "They're safe, and they're strong like their mom," Jake assured her, gesturing towards the puppies. Mrs. Allison knelt down beside them, her presence immediately comforting the tiny dogs. Jake watched as a small smile touched her lips, a brief moment of relief amidst the worry. "I don't know how to thank you, Jake. If you hadn't been here—" She couldn't finish, her voice choked with emotion. "It's what neighbours do," Jake said, placing a supportive hand on her shoulder. "We look out for each other." As they talked, Jake helped Mrs. Allison gather the puppies and bring them inside. He made sure they were settled comfortably in a warm, secure corner of the house. His mind, however, remained partly with Luna, hoping for good news from the vet. Before leaving, Jake paused at the door, turning back to Mrs. Allison, who was now watching over the puppies with a protective gaze. "I'll check in later, see how they're doing." And if you hear anything about Luna, let me know right away. Of course, Jake. And again, thank you. You've been a hero today, Mrs. Allison replied, her voice sincere. Jake nodded, feeling a sense of community and shared courage that the day's events had forged. As he walked back to his truck, parked a few houses down, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. Today had shown him the unexpected trials one might face, but also the profound connections that could arise from them. He promised himself to continue supporting Mrs. Allison and the puppies, a commitment that extended beyond just neighbourly duty, reflecting a deeper bond that the day's crisis had created. As Jake walked toward his truck, the quiet hum of the neighbourhood began to return, a stark contrast to the earlier commotion. The evening air was cooler now, the sun setting with a gentle glow that bathed the houses in soft golden light. It was a typical end to an atypical day, and Jake felt the weight of the afternoon's events settling deeply within him. He paused by his truck, taking a moment to reflect. The fear and urgency that had driven his actions were fading, replaced by a contemplative quiet. He thought about Luna, the black Labrador, whose fierce protectiveness had potentially saved her own life and certainly ensured the safety of her puppies. He considered Mrs. Allison, who had shown such strength in the face of uncertainty. And then there were the puppies, innocent and unaware of the drama their mother had endured for them. Turning to look back at Mrs. Allison's house, Jake could see her through the window, sitting by the puppies, a watchful guardian ensuring their comfort and safety. It struck him then how interconnected lives could become in moments of crisis, how a community's true strength was often revealed not during times of peace, but in times of turmoil. Mrs. Allison had thanked him, called him a hero, but Jake felt that the real hero was Luna. He hoped fervently that she would recover, that she would return home to the eager, loving eyes of her puppies. It wasn't just her life that hung in the balance, but the spirit of an entire neighbourhood that had come to know and love the gentle Labrador. As he started his truck, the engines rumble a familiar and comforting sound. Jake realised that this day would leave a lasting impression on him. The bonds formed under such intense circumstances were not easily forgotten. He knew he would keep a close eye on Luna's family, ready to help further if needed. Driving away, his thoughts lingered on the courage displayed by all, animal and human alike. He wondered about the stories he would tell of this day, the lessons he would carry forward. Luna's bravery, Mrs. Allison's gratitude, and the community's collective concern had painted a vivid picture of shared humanity and compassion. Jake knew that Maple Street would not be the same after today. This event would be remembered and recounted, strengthening the fabric of the neighbourhood. As the houses passed by his window, each a silent witness to the day's events, Jake felt a deep sense of connection to this place, more profound than ever before. The last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, and as the light faded, so did the remnants of the day's tension. In its place was a quiet acknowledgement of resilience and the unspoken promise of continued support. A community, though shaken, was now more closely knit, its stories intertwined, its resolve unyielded. As the story of Luna's extraordinary bravery and the community's unwavering support concludes, we are reminded of the incredible bonds that form in the face of adversity. Luna's courage not only saved her own life, but also secured the safety of her young puppies, leaving us all with a profound respect for the protective instincts of our canine friends. This tale goes beyond just a dramatic rescue. It highlights the strength and compassion that emerge when individuals come together to help one of their own. Now, we turn to you, our viewers. Have you ever witnessed or been part of a similar act of courage? How did it impact your view of community and the instinctual bonds between animals and humans? Share your stories in the comments below. If Luna's story moved you, give this video a like, subscribe for more heartwarming tales, and tap the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest videos. Together, let's celebrate the heroes among us, both human and animal, and continue to build communities where every member, no matter how small or furry, is valued and protected.